Thank you, Director Zients, for that testimony. Let me start out by saying I've seen the President criticized for not cutting the deficit in half in his first term. What was the deficit of a share of GDP that he inherited? Do you recall?
It was over 9%.
I believe that first year it was 10.1,
Right.
10.1%. In 2013, what will the deficit be as a share of GDP?
5.5%.
So that is pretty close to being cut in half. What will it be in 2014?
It'll achieve the cutting in half, the exact percent I can get for you, but by 2014 we will have cut it in half.
All right. Second question I'd have is question of revenues. Under the President's plan, revenues will average what share of GDP over the budget period?
A little below 20%.
A little below 20%. I just say the Fiscal Commission, which has been lauded for reaching a bipartisan agreement, had a level of 20.3% at the end of its budget period. During the Clinton years, revenue averaged about 19.4%. So the level of revenue that the President is calling for is completely in keeping with what the Bipartisan Fiscal Commission members recommended and what we saw during the Clinton years, which was the longest period of uninterrupted economic growth in the nation's history. Let me ask a second question. Third question. The ranking member has said that the President, over the 11 years that is included in his calculation, increased spending 62%. Do you know how much President Reagan increased spending in the 8 years of his administration?
I believe that was 69% across the 8 years from 81 to 89.
And can you tell us how much President Bush increased spending in his 8 years? I'm talking about Bush 44.
Yeah, from 2001 to 2009, 89%.
So the fact is, those Republican presidents, over shorter periods of time, increased spending much more than this president is proposing. So I just think those facts are important. Again, President Reagan, in just 8 years, increased spending 69%. President Bush, George W. Bush, increased spending 89% over 8 years. This president is being criticized for increasing over 11 years, a longer period, 62%, which is less than either of the others. With respect to the question of Mr. Liu's statement of a budget requiring 60 votes, I assume he was referring to the Budget Control Act that we passed last year that did require 60 votes.
Absolutely.
Is that your understanding?
Absolutely.
You know, that's different than a budget resolution. A budget resolution does only require a simple majority, but a budget resolution never goes to the President for signature.
Right.
Last year, we passed a Budget Control Act that's a law. That passed not only the House and the Senate, and of course required 60 votes in the Senate, but was signed by the President. So it's the law. Let me ask one other question, if I could, because I'm running out of time. The hard reality here is budgets and what we do with fiscal policy is inextricably linked to the economic outcomes that this country experiences. And if we look back at what this president walked into, isn't it true that the economy was shrinking at a rate of almost 9% in the final quarter of the previous administration?
Yes, it was.
And isn't it a fact that the economy is now growing in the most recent quarter at a rate of about 2.5%?
Yes.
So that is a turnaround that's really quite remarkable. From the economy shrinking at a rate of 9% to an economy growing at a rate of 2.5%. I believe the President deserves some credit for helping engineer that turnaround. The same is true with respect to jobs. Isn't it true that in the first month of 2008, 2009, that we lost 800,000 jobs in the private sector?
Unfortunately, yes.
Of course, that wasn't a result of this president's policies. He didn't take office till two-thirds of the way through that month. And now, in the most recent report, the most recent monthly report, we gained 250,000 jobs in the private sector. Isn't that the case?
Yes.
So it appears to me the president should be able to ask the American people to support a policy that has brought us back from the brink. And I assume that it's his intention with this budget to try to further the economic recovery and further help create jobs in the private sector. Is that the underlying strategy?
I think you captured it well in your opening statement, that it's a two-step. It is to make sure that we continue this recovery, starting with making sure that we extend the payroll tax holiday so 160 million Americans don't have a tax increase, doing the types of investments, the $50 billion that you mentioned in infrastructure, the $30 billion to modernize our schools, and at the same time start to put ourselves on a path towards deficit reduction that by 2018 has debt as a percent of GDP stabilized with our deficits coming in each year. Coming back to the figure for 2014 that you mentioned, by 2014 we're down to 3.9, which is not where we want to go, but a heck of a lot better than the 10.5% that you referenced with the president inherited up front.
I thank you.